Do you have any presentations online?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
Oh, we will call to order. Are we on? Are we ready? Okay. So we'll call to order the January 26th ad hoc meeting, ad hoc boundaries. Let me say, January 26th ad hoc attendance boundaries committee meeting. Let's do we do introductions first? So let's do some introductions first.
Carolyn Jones, board member.
Keith Bolton, board member.
Jeremy Goldhue, Chief Information Officer.
Can't hear.
Oh, we can't hear you, Phyllis. That's okay.
Allison Goodman, community member.
Carol Gibbs, was GC chair at Taft Elementary. Michelle Pfeiffer.
Trouble with the capital C. Oh, and I am Kareem Moffitt. Let's start. I'm a board member, but let's start with our very first item to reaffirm the committee chair. Do we vote on that?
I move that Dr. Kareem, I move that Dr. Kareem Moffitt will be reaffirmed as committee chair.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I don't know. It sounds good. So let's work on our very first item, which is committee meeting dates for the remainder of the year, 2023. Board members, what are good dates? Let's start here. Is this the fourth Thursday of the month work?
I don't know about that, but I like the later date since we do have community folks that come. So, I mean, the 4:00.
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I do prefer the later. And you said if we check the fourth Thursday of the month. Yeah.
So
That works for me.
So no, we don't. It doesn't look like we have any big board commitments on the fourth Thursday.
That sounds great.
Oh wait, yeah, that'll be the 23rd of February. Community members, how does that look for you all and staff?
4:00 is good. I have my board meets on the last Thursday. Sometimes that's a bit. I have 2:00. So.
Okay. We don't have our superintendent here. That's the only other schedule we really need to kind of make sure works. But for right now, until she comes, we will do the fourth Thursday of every month at 4 p.m. And I will say they're only going to be 4 to 5:30. I think we budgeted till 6 o'clock, but we're not going to be in here till 6 o'clock. So 4 to 5. I like that idea. See, that's why I say trouble with a capital C. I like that. So our next one, just for the record, will be February the 23rd. And then the fourth Thursday moving forward. And this is a question mark until we get administration's confirmation. All right, so it works. So
That's our music accompaniment.
that is our reminder for everyone in the room to make sure that you silence your phone.
I did, and see?
See, it was right on cue. It was right on cue. So let's jump right into our agenda. We've got a very packed one. I'm not exactly certain if we will get through everything. In fact, I anticipated that we would not, which is fine. But we are going to take some hearing of the public after each item. So if you do have a question or a comment, feel free. I will call on you, and we will get a chance to have your voice heard in real time. But let's go to summations from the board members, the ad hoc committee, administration, community about the program audit. So, give me just a second. Do we have that? We don't have that presentation, do we?
What?
Like from her audit. Let's just wing it.
Yeah.
So, board members here, ad hoc committee members, we got a chance to see twice the presentation with considerations from Superintendent Wright and her team. Let's talk about what we've heard. I'm gonna try to pull that up while we're
I'll remember.
okay. And Superintendent Wright is joining us, so this is right
just like
on
my phone.
time. Superintendent Wright, she just walked in, so just for those that are online, we've done introductions. We are at the point on the agenda where we're doing summations regarding the audit and the considerations that you posed. I'm trying to pull that up. Your audit report. Do you have it, Rob? So give us just a second. That's okay. Just to, while we're pulling that up, Superintendent Wright, we have kind of looked at the fourth Thursday of every month at 4 p.m. to 5:30 for the ad hoc committee meetings. How does that look for you?
I'll tell you in a second.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think the last slide has some considerations that maybe we can just jump to the last one, Rob, because that may be what we can kind of focus on a little bit.
We can start on the last page, but there are some other stuff that'd be
You want
great.
to start? Sooner?
No, that's good. No. Let's start on the last
Okay.
page. I think that's fine.
Okay.
He's checking it. District is usually.
And what I see right now, I've gone through April, and I think that's fine.
Excellent.
Okay.
And if there is a conflict, Jeremy is here as actually our representative as well, but if there is a conflict, I can also submit a team member. But for right now, from now through April.
Super. Let's do it.
Okay, so Ms. Phyllis, confirmation that the fourth Thursday of every month that's going to be our ad hoc committee, at least to May, and then we will reassess if we need to. And so everyone, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. If you're like me, that was a G.I. Joe theme. I don't know if you guys remember that. Telling my age. But so make sure that you mark your calendars. February the 23rd will be our next meeting. Okay, so let's move to talking about the considerations. I'm trying to pull this up. Superintendent Wright, you gave us some considerations to think about, and
This is what was at the board meeting.
There was one
It was
slide before that one,
Yeah.
and then that was the one. And then there was the second one that was talking about the schools that
Yeah. There you go.
had they were a 1 in the vision in their classroom as compared to what their current theme was.
okay. So we're at the point where we're just going to talk about some of the summations, get some feedback. The committee members, would you like to start? Start. This is not a lively crowd in here today. Good gracious
It will be.
almighty.
It's, maybe we
Is that what it
could
is?
start at the front
Okay, so let's
of the one that we had in ad hoc. Because this is the same. This isn't the same. Is it the same?
It's two different. So what you're looking at, it's the same.
This is
thing.
what you want me to look at?
It's both of them. So this right here, that one is just the PowerPoint. So that slide is like the second to the last slide for the PowerPoint. That's the full program implementation document.
It's got lots of reading. Yeah.
But the PowerPoint is the one that you had in ad hoc, and then we. This on, Rob. The PowerPoint is the one we had in ad hoc that I just shared with the full board at the meeting before last.
So do you want to start at the beginning?
No. We'll start here. We'll just work back to some other stuff. Yes.
If I recall, we did have a little bit of a discussion about the consideration, because I think each one of us, what we probably didn't do, I don't know if it's documented, if we took it down, like what those recommendations were, because I can remember very specifically, um, everybody, each one of us went around and said we thought this was good, and and I believe Ms. Bolton said she thought it was good, but there were some things in there that she didn't agree with. I mean, I think it's okay to go back, but I'm just saying,
Yeah, let's just
for the
do
sake of
it.
time, we can.
So let's
do it.
just be informal. We're gonna stop being formal.
Yeah.
We're gonna just be very informal. Let's start with the board committee members and just share your thoughts on what you've heard. If you have not seen this and you're online and you don't know what we're talking about, then you've got some catching up to do, because we've video recorded our last meeting, and it was at the last board meeting. So go back and look at the full presentations. We're going to just share our considerations with the people that are in the room. Those online, raise your hand, and then let's start with Board Member Bolton or Board Member Jones. Which one would you like to start?
I'll
What did
start.
you think? Okay.
I believe we do need an early college program. I would prefer that kids across the district had an opportunity to participate in it. But I do think Schroeder does need a focus. And I think Schroeder is, in previous years, Schroeder's been a real gem of a high school. And I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say that at this point, but it also is part of the general Madisonville community. And I know we're focusing some of our attention there for sure. And on John P. Parker, we removed that college prep separate one. Is that correct? Yeah, and that's good because all of our schools ought to at least have a program for college prep. I think that was part of the reasoning. For the J.P. Parker has for more than a decade had a number of different school focuses and has always had some difficulty making sure that the total community was going to attend. Very frankly, if I recall, J.P. Parker had as many, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, had as many kids leave the neighborhood to go to other schools as they had stay. So I know when we did earlier engagement with J.P. Parker, the environmental studies thing works because there's a tremendous number of folks in that area that believe very fully in outdoor ed. I mean, they basically made sure that Member Bates and I heard that 3 or 4 times in a number of sessions. I still have a preference that what I heard from the community too is that they would prefer to have a K-8 system. And the K-8 system would be good because we have, I think, a K-8 system in like Sailor Park and another, I think we have one in the Central Corridor, and then I'm not sure we have one on the east side, but the K-8, but that would require us probably to repurpose the lighthouse building for like the littlest people, preschool and primary grades. I don't know, but and there certainly is other space for lighthouse, which is the fewest number of kids. Spencer, I think we made a commitment to the Spencer community to be 312. I think it probably should be 412, but we would have to find another building for its upper grades, as you suggested or mentioned, Superintendent. And there probably is a nearby CPS school that might be able to do that. But that's I don't want to break that promise or commitment we made to Spencer to be a 412. I think it was a 312, but I believe it should be a 412. Just because of as you've emphasized, the reading piece, and when we're actually identifying kids, it's maybe the 4 through 12. So that's a facilities issue, I guess. I'm worried about Ethel Taylor and Douglas and South Avondale being so under capacity. And I think you were right to start to figure out some other purposes for that. Both of those, all 3 of those are close to 3 other schools, too. Ethel Taylor's very close to Chase, and Douglas is close to Spencer, and South Avondale and Rockdale are, well, you could almost throw, well, I guess,
Around the corner. You're close.
yeah, I think former vice president could throw a softball that far, just from one school to the next.
I can still do it.
I know you can. I don't mess with you. So, I mean, I think that's the interesting thing. And I think you talked about, because thank you for listening to the committee saying we really are interested in some middle schools, because I think you were talking about some of those being able to be middle schools. Because I've said something like that to 5 or 6 people in the community, and they seem very interested in middle school stuff. So it's something, I don't know which grades those are, but that would also help us, since almost all of our high schools are over capacity. That's another way to address that problem. And you know how I feel about the Cheviot can't be the gifted program from Cheviot can't be removed. That's the way it is, because the West Siders already feel often that they get second.
Yeah, but
Cheviot's great, but I would fight for that one. But those are some of my reactions to. You picked out the best. I mean, good stuff.
Okay. Yes, Board Member Jones.
Okay, yeah, I think what we've been presented is really a good foundation. I'm going to say this as a prelude to what I think about the considerations, but what I'm about to say has more to do with work plan stuff than it does the actual considerations. I think we have to be clear in our work plan what, when we have to define what we're talking about, ad hoc attendance boundaries. We have to clarify whether we're talking specifically or exclusively about elementary schools and or high schools, because high schools are included in these considerations. So having said that, and that's a work plan concern. Having said that, I don't know, other than Schroeder's PIDEA designation, I agree with us needing an early college program focus, probably at all the high schools. But there was an issue, I didn't know, Superintendent, if you were aware of this, but there was an issue with Schroeder continuing to have that PIDEA designation, and they actually thought that they were still doing PIDEA. So somewhere there was a breakdown in communication prior to you coming, because this is something they called me about it a long time ago, and they were told they didn't like it. So, which I understand. They had, whatever communication just didn't trickle down to them, but we got to deal with that piece of it. The John P. Parker piece, I think there's lots of questions about John P. Parker. I mean, even as recent as just this week when we talked about it, some of the kind of concerns that are going on around there. Personally, I'd like John P. Parker, I'd like to strengthen the enrollment out there and give them a strong focus and build a community around that, so that that really is a neighborhood school that feeds into Schroeder, perhaps. So, yeah. So I like that idea. In terms of repurposing Spencer, I hear Board Member Bolton say we did commit to having that school be, what was it, 3 to 12 or 4 to 12?
It was supposed to be, I think, 4 to 12, and it became 3 to 12 for some reason.
I think the only thing, I agree with you that it's only a facilities issue. Mm-hmm. They just don't have the space. And so in terms of the repurpose it, I don't want to see the program or the grade levels and all that change. I would like to see if there's an alternative for them or something we could do to enhance the building space issue. I do support keeping Cheviot with the gifted program. I do like the concept of K through 8 schools. However, I don't know in terms of space what we can do with that. It may be that we work toward building a K through 8 system, but there may be some areas where we can maintain 7th and 8th graders in the high school. And I'm thinking around maybe specializations kinds of things, So that, I think we have to do some more work around that. And then we already dealt with the school boundaries for the 3 schools that are there. So that's what I have.
Yeah.
Could I to react to what Jones has said? I wouldn't. We've already failed at having, and I'm sure with all new wonderful people, we wouldn't fail. However, my dad, who was in the Army, fought with Patton. You never pay for territory twice. And we already lost the battle about having a K-8 system and that 9-12 stuff. And then, because we went to a K-6, then the 7-12 for obvious reasons, or reasons we can talk about later. I don't think that we have to have it be that macro. I think we can increase the number. We have some K-8s. Our kind of international schools are K-8, Sailor Park. The international Hartwell, yeah. And so I'm saying we don't have a K-8 on the east side as such. So that would be the K-3 could be what we're talking about with J.P. Parker. But again, I think we should still generally, our primaries in elementary should still remain PK6s, because right now where we have over enrollment is in need for more space is preschool and high school. So I don't think we should do things that we have to figure out ways to deal with that. But so I agree with Ms. Jones. We don't want to go totally K-8, but I think also, you start to look at the 2 schools within Avondale, or the 2 schools in College Hill, or the 2 schools that are in the north side and wherever. You have so much more opportunity when there's 2 kind of cohabitating in the neighborhood. So maybe we could look at that. But yeah, I don't want to go back to that was bad. The elementary people wanted the 7th and 8th graders out. We already have done junior high. That didn't work very well. So I think some kind of good mix.
So I will share my thoughts with regard to Schroeder. I just really believe we need to have some semblance of college prep, even in the elementary schools. We need to be focusing on tech and workforce development, and bringing that all the way down if we can. I don't have a big preference regarding Padea. But so I do think that to have John P. Parker be a feeder for Schroeder is a great idea. I thought that was a great idea. I have a little different opinion about John P. Parker. I do tend to agree with Board Member Jones in that we need to build into that community. I remember that there was like 106 on a slide, 106 students that were kind of out of the population area, like out of that community area. But then I do know that they have a preschool program, and some of the preschool programs are district determined. So they don't determine their own population for the preschool. So that could impact, they service like 60, 70 preschoolers. So some of that 106 may not have been their doing, but rather our doing. So that concerns me. Because I think that number is skewing the results. I do know that community, John P. Parker, is diverse. I think when I looked it up, they were like 70% African American, 30% other. So it's different than it has been. It's not predominantly African American. And I'm going to say something that I think is probably an elephant in the room, but I'm going to say it anyway. Many of these communities that we're talking about are being gentrified. South Avondale, or Avondale, is one of them. John P. Parker, Madisonville is another. So it's not missed on me that in our discussions of talking about programming and repurposing buildings and changing, whatever we're talking about, we need to also interject the gentrification that's going on within those communities. I think it is, I don't want to set up a system where we are preparing for a population inadvertently to push other people out. So I'm going to say that. We can go into it in more depth, but John P. Parker, I think, is in the middle of that. Additionally, when we talk about with regard to number 2, well, for Spencer and Cheviot, I was part of the conversations with regard to gifted students. I think we should definitely build into those programs, and I agree with you. It is simply a facilities issue, but it's not taking away from anything. We cannot afford to take away Spencer or Cheviot. As far as I'm concerned, they need to be built into. With regard to Ethel Taylor Douglas and South Avondale, I'm a little concerned I like the idea of a middle school. I like 6, 7, 8 maybe, because historically speaking, history always repeats itself. 6, 7, 8 is a tough age. I think they take some unique teachers, and there are some teachers that want to teach that age. We need to get them in one centralized location and get them out of the littles and then out of the bigs because they're just a unique population. But I'm concerned about closing or repurposing a building like South Avondale or Ethel Taylor or Douglas to push those students while they are underpopulated. We're going to push them onto another school. Let's use South Avondale as an example because it's in my community. We're going to take those 300 students and push them on Rockdale. That's going to overpopulate that building to bring in other students in the community. I just think we need to look at that a little bit. I'm for a middle school, absolutely for it. I don't know what it looks like, and I want to look at that in totality rather than just in a silo. I think whatever we do to the east side, we need to do to the west side, because unfortunately, the west side gets just they always feel justifiably like they're an afterthought, and I don't want us to do that. I want us to do things in tandem, and if we have a middle school on the east side, relatively east side, then we need to have the same on the west side initially, so that's not an afterthought. And then the boundaries, we kind of talked about Silverton, Mount Washington, and Coverdale. I would really like to understand more about the transportation, how that impacts the magnet schools with regard to transportation, because that concerns me that the Silverton families are impacted with regard to transportation. Their designation is not magnet, but their enrollment is magnet. Their transportation is impacted by magnet. So that kind of just really concerns me there too. I think we need a little bit more clarity on that too.
I'll wait, then I'll respond whenever.
I wanted to respond. You said something that triggered a thought in me. And now that you even said something about transportation, it even reinforces kind of what I'm thinking. It's like we have these quadrants, right? Or at least we used to call them quadrants or corridors or whatever we call them, right? Mm-hmm. I do like, the thought of having the same programs throughout these corridors makes the impact of transportation much more, palatable, and it's feasible to do it. Yeah. And it also keeps kids in their neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. If we can broaden the programming. And when I think about West Side, for example, what are the high schools on the West Side? West High, Gamble, Dater. There are 3 high schools, and you can't tell me that we can't build programs that would attract those kids who live on the West Side. And I do feel like we can build. I would rather strengthen those areas and build where we need to build programming to balance that out across. And I do think transportation, it can't be an afterthought, but I do see where the impact of transportation and looking at that is going to be critical in all of this. So I would add that to a consideration, actually, is transportation.
I think the Schroeder idea is very good. And I'm on Madisonville, been involved with that now every year on the board. The Madisonville, whether it's about J.P. Parker or some other thing, or Lighthouse or what have you, I do think the issue there, one way to look at it is the gentrification. The other piece of it is in our relatively well integrated neighborhoods, our public schools are not integrated unless they are Montessori. I mean, if you want diversity, our most diverse schools are our Montessori schools. Is I think that's still correct. It was a couple of years ago. But for the Madisonville, it is people going to Sands. More than half of the children, are going elsewhere. So I think it's important to find a way to have the whole community feel like they want to come to the school. And I think K-8, and I think this outdoor ed piece and this environmental science, not to mention the big giant there, MedPace, and that, that kind of emphasis as well. But to what Member Jones said, if we do that, the quadrants, apparently it's still a transportation term, but if we did that, if we separate our district geographically, in each of those geographic, that's why I support, one of the reasons I support 3, that the same kinds of offerings have to be in each of the 3. And interestingly enough, we're actually kind of close to that. Because that way it's a sustainable choice, it's an equitable choice, it impacts it impacts transportation. I mean, because even when not today, but let's using the map that Jeremy's put together, you start putting up what already is almost divided by 3. We're getting close there. But just to your Rockdale piece, I wouldn't free up one building. I would, to get a middle school over Rockdale and South Avondale, I'd put all the littlest people in one building. And I'd put the upper elementary, so, 5, 6, or whatever it would be, in the other building, so that you kind of, at least for that community, have a primary elementary, but you also have a middle school. So, but again, it's all like you're trying to fit who's, from Pleasant Hill to Winton Hills. That's an enrollment problem. You'd have to add a little bit on to maybe Winton Hills. So it's cool.
I just think that since we are taking the time to do this work, I would love for us to look at, again, I'm going to say, like, in things in totality with regard to transportation. We've got people who go from the west side to the east side for one school. We've got people that do that because they want to go legacy where their parents went to school. And we do have a transient population of students because of gentrification, but also because parents are transient and they move very regularly. We've got kids that have been in 3 schools within a year. That's a reality. It's unheard of for me, but it's a reality for a lot of our students. And so if we're going to talk about transportation and magnet schools and the not crossing, I don't want to say boundaries or corridors, then I do agree with you. We got to make sure that it's the same offering across. And the transportation piece is something new to me because we have had an example of a school where a student moved, but they were going to a Montessori, and then they were their address was out of the quadrant, and they couldn't get transportation. And that floors me. But I understand where that is. So I just think that we should take the time to look at transportation impact, programming impact, grade impact, and staffing too, because meaning staffing, who's going to teach the 5th, 6th, 7th grade, do we have a population for that? But yes, I think it's time for superintendent, and then we'll go to the community.
Great. So first of all, thank you for all of the feedback. It's fascinating to hear. This is exciting, and thinking about where our work goes next. So just a few responses. Going from each of these and kind of a bit more background on where they came from or responses to the responses that I've heard for today or the feedback. So I agree that across our schools, we need to have we need to create a college-going culture across all school buildings, and I think that starts in our pre-K environment. We have curriculum that is scheduled to be a college readiness and college preparatory curriculum across the board. I think you've heard me talk quite a bit about making sure that the curriculum that we have, at least starting with our kindergarten populations, the curriculum that we have there is the right balance of professional development that supports that level of rigor in terms of the curriculum. So I would definitely agree with that. What the audit showed for us, however, and we also know this by looking at our data, is that we have an opportunity to do just a bit more in terms of each of the areas. So the thought around Schroeder and doing the deep dive around Schroeder was not necessarily, so my vision, and I think I shared this before, my vision ultimately would be to have an early college program across all of our high schools that are not designated magnet type high schools, right? That's work that I've led before, so it's work that I know that happens. However, we have to start somewhere. And in order for us to do it and do it well, generally that's starting with a smaller population and then growing from there. So initially, whether that's one school or two schools, right? Selecting the schools, starting the early college program there, socializing it for the students that are in those buildings, starting at 7th grade, because they don't actually enter into a pure early college environment until they get at least to 9th or 10th grade. But starting with the supportive services for the students, starting with the augmentation that's needed around the curriculum and preparation, so that at 9th grade, they then begin to move into going into an early college program. This is a little different when we think about early college, because the vision also is to have students graduate with their AA degree when they graduate from high school, not just the covering of the first semester. So we currently only have one of our universities in the area right now that has helped to create that program already, and that's Miami University. They're the only one currently that has an early college program where the students can earn their AA by the time they graduate. There's a requirement in Ohio of the number of hours that a student can actually take, and that it can be paid for before they graduate, but there are waivers to work around that. So that begins the conversation. Since then, not only have we had the conversation with Miami, but we've had the conversation with University of Cincinnati, who is also very in tune to the opportunity for the students. And depending on where we go ultimately with the early college program, we will also have an opportunity for Cincinnati State. So it's not just that it's just that one institution, but thinking about how we're supporting our colleges and universities and how they're supporting our program across the board. The start with Schroeder, the way that we visioned it, would be that it would be open to all students in the city, so that it would not just be for Schroeder students to start with, until we're then able to branch out what that program is. Now, if the suggestion of the board and working back with the team is that, okay, right, we think this is a great idea, but can we do it at 2 schools? My response to that would be yes, but then we would be identifying what those 2 schools are, and also beginning to work with a quasi feeder school at the K-6 level that we would then begin to prepare at the same time. So we're doing that in pairs, so we're growing in pairs together. So that was a part of the thought, the background on the thought around Schroeder. I would agree with former board president. I know we're all going to stop that in a minute, but I would agree. It just had such a catch. It had such a catch. I agree with former board president around the conversation for Schroeder and Paideia, because even since I've been here, some of that's been shared with me. Like technically for, Paideia is a model that's similar to Montessori. And so it's a whole school instructional design, instructional model that you also connect with the Paideia Association. It's not where you kind of do it on your own. And there are some that once you learn it, you do tenets of it, but really to be connected to that design, it is a connection that happens at the district level where there's funding that goes with it. There's required professional development that continues to happen. There's certifications that go with it. So I think what happened is you have people in the building, because actually once you learn it, you don't unlearn it, right? You have people in the building that are still learning some of those strategies and they're still using them, but they're not technically considered a part of the overall Paideia umbrella. So I think that that's the difference. Giving them an identity, because we've identified that there's not necessarily an identity, and there is an opportunity to not push anyone out, but be inclusive of everyone that's around as well. Because we're correct, like with JP Parker, the area is going through gentrification. Great, but we have to acknowledge that the area is going through gentrification, and also at the same time, work with our students that are in the population and try to be as inclusive as we can of the other students that are in the area also. So that was the thought with Schroeder. Going to JP Parker, it was just that. JP Parker currently has, as we think about not undoing work, right? Thinking holistically about the work. Location, proximity, I think everyone supported the thought process behind making them kind of a feeder program together. But JP Parker is our school that has more students that come from outside the boundary than from inside the boundary. And part of that could be the gentrification that's happening within the community. So that's understood. But how do we also offer services and programs that will bring some of the students in that currently live in that area? And one of the ways that you do that, as we talked about earlier, and when we first, I think my very first ad hoc that I attended before we even started talking about when we started talking about the program audit, is you identify the programs that families are the most interested in for their children, and then you build those programs. Not to move any. And JP Parker's great job with the environmental studies program. So it's not to remove the environmental studies program, but what you pair with that would be a focus around like a pre-early college program for the students, so that they then again move into the thought process of once we leave JP Parker, we go into Schroeder. So that was the kind of the thought process behind that. So I'll stop there and just see if there are any questions or responses to just that part before I go to the next one.
I do have some questions too, but I'm comments, but I want to go to Board Member Jones.
Well, just real quick, I just want to express, I like the idea that you said, okay, if I could buy into the Schroeder concept that you're talking about, if it mirrors something on the west side or wherever, either one of the corridors.
You make me so happy.
Are you proud of me?
I am.
See, this is
wait
comedy.
until the rest of the agenda.
I got you. I understand.
But anyway, I think that's an innovation. I think we have to think about it. With John P. Parker, we're also in competition with the charters out there.
Correct.
And we're going to have to build, when you say we got to talk to families to see where their interests are, I think that's so important
I agree.
in all of this. But I'd be willing to bet you that those families in those areas, probably on the west side or one of the other corridors, would say the same thing. This is what we want. And that might be an ideal situation.
And it was one of the thought processes behind this. The other thing, and I know we have some more feedback, but the other thing that we also have to address on the west side in terms of high school is we have a growing population of our ELL families on the west side.
Yes.
And we have to, so when we take a West High, for example, West High and Dade are together. One school has about 300 to 400 students that are ELL, and the other has just the opposite, right? So together in those two school populations, you could really outfit one school that becomes a newcomer center to provide the kind of adequate support for our students in the environment. So it would really be thinking about, one, whether it's a different facility that we're looking at on the west side in terms of where we would put an early college. Two, West High is one of the first places that I think about in walking the building and having walked there several times, that there would be some excitement by the 7th and 8th grade students being in a different environment. And so thinking about the expansion of possibly an early college. The other thing that we have at West High right now that goes into an additional conversation is where we begin to go with outfitting for CTE. So there is a small program, a fire safety program. Ultimately, we know that there is the goal for us to really be able to engage in a public safety academy. And so there could open up some additional opportunity there as well. So I agree, and I am all in, finding a location and saying, okay, if we do this on one side, we have to do it on the other. The question would be whether we do that at the same time. And if that answer is yes, we find a location. I mean, we can make that part happen. And there are enough students that would be interested, that we could get engaged, that we could begin to build the supports so that we're able to truly, launch in a way that allows us to be supportive to the student population.
I want us to get to our community members' thoughts. I just want to say this because a couple of things that you shared, that both of you have shared, all three of you have shared, piqued my interest. So one, I absolutely love the college theme. Clearly, I got a doctorate, so I stayed a long time in college. But I have had kids that I have a son who that was not his interest from a very early age. And I have another son who is in agriculture because he wanted to be a farmer. I like the college focus, but I do think we need to also recognize that that is not the intention of everybody.
Agreed.
And we need to have programming that speaks to that. Now, I'm going to say this, and this is not to disparage any work that our team and our staffs have done. I think our career tech programming can be more robust.
Agreed.
And I think we can have more hands-on programming in an elementary level that leads it into real life careers that are paying good money for our kids in high schools. I don't hear enough of that. And so that needs to be on the west side. It needs to be on the east side. It needs to be. And I don't hear that. I'm concerned about a newcomer center. And I'm concerned about a newcomer center for the same reason that I'm concerned about tracking, because I think that lends itself to the opportunity. I'm not saying it will, but it can lend itself to an opportunity for a lack of immersion, a lack of inclusivity. I have concerns about that. I think we should not have anything separate but equal. That makes me shiver. And so I don't think we should have a newcomer center. We should have programming that is robust, that is innovative, that's high quality on both sides. I think it should be done at the same time. And with regard to John P. Parker, the programming interest, I think parents and families, I'm going to speak for myself, but I'm going to stretch out a little bit. Parents and families want those programs, but that's not why the majority of families, to me, are going to their schools. They're going to their schools because of the relationships that they either have, their parents have had with that particular school. Maybe their parents graduated, maybe their grandparents went there, or they've got teachers there that they trust. It's about relationships. That is probably the reason why a lot of those families are coming to JPP. Not necessarily the horticulture or the agriculture program that they have there is a plus, but they're driving there because they trust that program. So I think that what we will find is that a lot of our schools have students and families remaining where they are because they trust the programming, the staff to implement the programming. But I do want to go to our community members because we talked a lot, and there's more considerations that were presented, and we've got community members here who have heard from other schools. And I want to hear what you think too. So let's start it off. Just say where you're from, and you've got to be on the mic. And if we have anybody that is online that would like to say something, just raise your hand and Rob will see it and he'll get to you and you can comment as well. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I am Erin Fay and I live in Pleasant Ridge and my son is an 8th grader at Walnut Hills. I just had a couple quick comments. The first one was piggybacking on what you just said. My son has said for a long time he doesn't want to go to college. I'm a real estate agent. He wants to be a real estate agent, which I think is hilarious. But I really don't think that's his path in life. He doesn't like school. He doesn't want to be there. So I do. And I think one thing that I said a lot when we were looking at where he was going to go after Pleasant Ridge Montessori, it was a very weird time. 6th grade was COVID all the way. And then so we didn't get to tour Clark. It was a very hard decision. And if he didn't get in Walnut, which he almost didn't, he was 1 point away, but then you all dropped the standard. So he got in Walnut at the last second. But a conversation that I had with a lot of people was, it feels like CPS doesn't have just a normal high school, just a normal everyday, like Walnut is so great, and that's where I went, and I love it to death. But it is college. You go to college if you go to Walnut. So I don't love the idea of like elementary college early college and elementary. Like, I feel like elementary is for playing and interpersonal relationships and sharing. So I just wanted to kind of say that because I hear college a lot, which I think other schools need college prep. Like, other schools should not have college prep. But the other thing I wanted to comment on was a little bit of John P. Parker. I live in Pleasant Ridge, and I listen a lot, and I'm a real estate agent, so I listen a lot to what a lot of people say. And I feel like people haven't been choosing John P. Parker for a really long time. I don't feel like that has anything to do with gentrification. That has not been a choice for years and years and years. Similar to Northside and Chase, people have not been choosing Chase for a long time, long before gentrification. So I don't know fully the reasons. I think a lot of it is just perception of what someone thinks something might be. But I also worry with schools like that you're going to put in a certain focus because there was a group of parents for a short amount of time that were yelling about it. And I have a little bit of an idea of who was talking about the outdoor education at that school. But is that really what the community that's there, or that the community really wants forever? And is that just kind of pandering to what's happening at that moment and not what is a long-term solution? Because John P. Parker is a school that really does need enrollment increased, and it could be just as good as Pleasant Ridge Montessori. I don't know why it's not. I've never been there, so I think that's really all. But that also leads me to say, like, my kid went to a Montessori, and CPS has really pushed Montessoris a lot, and it seems to be working, and it has for a while. So I would implore people to kind of keep that at the forefront of their mind. But not everyone is always going to choose that. Like, not everyone loves it. I did go to a middle school. I went to Cincinnati Bilingual Academy, in the early 90s. And I think that's right when all the middle schools went away, was right after I went there. And I loved the middle school. So that was my piece on all the different things.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Luke Blocher. I'm the chair of the Clifton Area Neighborhood School, LSDMC. Great to see everybody. I'm here for a couple of reasons. I really appreciate the conversation, and I'm glad you guys are having all these discussions. And so as a general matter, I have a fourth grader and third grader at Cairns, and another one who's going to show up next year. So I'll have 3 in the school next year, which is going to be great. And I've been involved with Cairns since the sort of get-go. I'm here for a couple reasons. One is we've been on the LSTMC, we've been sort of tracking this conversation a little bit, and one, just wanted to give a very brief update and tell you guys that things are really great at Cairns, and it's a wonderful place, and I think you should consider it a success story of CPS. It's I think all the sort of metric indicators are all very positive, and without getting all the details on that, there's incredible teachers there.
No.
Very
incredible teachers. Do you know?
There's one that's both my kids' favorite teacher, will remain nameless. But also, Board Member Bolton, you mentioned diversity in neighborhood schools. I don't know all the demographic numbers, but it's, I know that when I'm there and when I look at my pictures of my kids' class, it's a highly diverse population from the 3 neighborhoods. It's 43% free and reduced lunch. So I think by all the sort of standards of what I think we all want great urban neighborhood schools to be, it's achieving that. And so we're really proud of it and excited. And one of the things that comes along with that is we are growing. Cairns is, with those 3 neighborhoods of Clifton, Cuff, and Spring Grove Village, from a sort of standing start of nothing, having a 1 kindergarten class and growing grade by grade, we are now at 5th grade, and next year will be a 6th grade, which is the cap. And for the last few years, we've been growing at 70 students per grade. And why that number is important is that CANS was designed from a structural perspective to say you're going to have 2 classrooms per grade. That's what the building capacity accepts. And if you just do the math, 70 kids a grade is more than two classrooms per year getting added. So we're having growth both in obviously the new classes that come in, but then we're sort of laterally growing each year. And our kindergarten and first grade classes right now, I think are the last numbers I saw were at 52 and 55. So you're already bumping up against, I think, the contractual limits and all those rules that you guys know quite well. So we have a space issue, and I just wanted to, and I've tried to communicate, we try to be aggressive in communicating about it, so we just wanted to take a chance to publicly communicate it in a meeting, as in addition to all the discussions.
Get it on the record.
We've had about it, right, exactly. Get it on the record. As a former municipal employee, I understand the importance of having things be in the record at public meetings. So I wanted to let you all know about that and have that on the record. I wanted to just say as well, give you the brief sort of history of how we've been addressing this, just so you know. On the LSDMC, we formed a facilities committee in 2020 because we knew this was on the horizon as a question. We also knew that there are issues around the outside space there because there's a sort of fenced-in playground and there's open space around the building, but it's not really usable. It's on Clifton Avenue, and there's safety reasons. I think you're not really allowed to have kids out there during the day. So we knew that there were just going to be facilities issues in the future. There's no gym at CANS. There's issues like that. So we formed that committee over the course of the last couple school years. We pretty aggressively sort of did our own analysis and investigation and auditing of the space issues. We did surveys of we had walkthroughs with our group and with people in the building. We did surveys of the staff and other people in the building as to sort of what they need. And we came out of that with a report that we had this past fall, that laid out on a basic numbers level the trajectory of the population growth, sort of where the squeeze is going to start to happen. It's already happening, but where it's going to start to happen next year, and then particularly where it might get even worse after that. And also some recommendations for how space could be used. And so I won't get into details on that, but just so you know that exists. We had a resolution of our LSDMC in the fall to officially say we want to make a request for more space. And we want to alert CPS of the problem, and we want to make a request for more space. And we, I think shortly after that time, there was some interaction between the administration and our staff in the building. So I think we have shared that information up. And again, I just want to get this all out there for the record. But the last thing I would say is two last things I would say is, one, this is just a fundamental sort of numbers issue in that the building only has so many classroom-sized rooms. CANS also has several other needs for office space in the building, and one is, for example, the UC partnership. There's a part of the foundation of CANS where there's actually a sort of high number of UC students and other people sort of participating at CANS. And they actually teach a class 1 day a week at CANS for some of those people. That's a room that's used for that. That's shared with several other purposes. But as starting next year, and this happens next year, we run out of classrooms. We start to use up almost all the classrooms. There aren't rooms for all these other functions. So those are happening in hallways or not sure where they're happening. Teacher workroom, special education. The ALC right now is already in a hallway. There's just and I know this is something that people face everywhere. So I know it's not a unique problem, but I just wanted to bring a specific problem to your all's attention because it is, I think, growing at a high trajectory. We are, and also want to reference and acknowledge that CPS does own the Rawson building next door. We have in our sort of reports have laid out how that building could be used as an overflow space for what we have needs for. I don't think that's the permanent solution necessarily for the needs of CANS, but would be an immediate short-term solution that is, relatively speaking, under CPS's control. And so we want to highlight that as a potential idea. And also, we have had, wanted you all to know that on behalf of CANS, we have had just sort of open-ended discussions with the Clifton Town Meeting folks, the local community council, who would have to weigh in on any zoning issues related to this around sort of what's going on at CANS and the growth and what our needs are and it's just the idea. They haven't done any voting or anything like that, but the idea of using Rawson as an overflow space. And without putting any words in their mouth, I think it was a very positive discussion. So we, again, appreciate the sort of time right here and appreciate all of you, what you've already all done for CANS over the years, which is deeply, deeply, deeply appreciated. Board Member Jones and Bolton, you both have been sort of with us from the beginning, and you've been integral to everything we've ever done. But these are pressing issues for us, and we're very focused on them. And of course, welcome any questions now, of course, but whenever we can be helpful, know that we're here and we're ready to partner. Thank you.
Does anyone else have? I like the little people, so my heart goes to CANS. I love the littles. Here we come. Here's trouble.
Yeah.
Um,
River City.
First of all, Western Hills used to have what we called vocational ed, a whole building that was nothing but vocational education. I don't know if it's still there, it's been torn down, or if you put the career stuff, but and I really like the idea of community input. We, in saying that, I'd like to address gentrification, at least in Madisonville and Mount Auburn. I've been doing development in Mount Auburn for almost 8 years. The city's push in the neighborhoods, the urban neighborhoods, is density and raising value of homes. Madisonville, like Mount Auburn, has a lot of vacant property, a lot of just abandoned buildings. And so we have raised the number of people living in Mount Auburn by 21%, but not changed the makeup, and not, other than the 8 people that Chin and Dukeway put out on the street, we haven't displaced anyone. So, and Madisonville is going through that same kind of, they've got a lot of abandoned property and a lot of empty lots. And so I'm hoping, and of course, gentrification has the same kind of meaning as affordable housing. Everybody's all over the board in terms of what that means to them. But we have a lot of families moving in, both black and white, and those children are not coming to Taft. And I would like to know why.
Taft Elementary.
Yeah. Yeah, Taft Elementary. So getting out in the community and finding out what would make those parents be interested in going to Taft would be, I think, great. And I'm sure other schools, and we're 90% pre-lunch.
And I will say, you have a beautiful building over there. I was really shocked, but it's kind of off the cuff. It's not. It's like a really diamond in the rough. You don't even notice that it's there. The building is really nice, and there's a school right there in front of it too.
It's a charter school.
Charter school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
If I could add one, I know we're pushed on time, but just to add just a couple things. And thank you for your input and just your feedback collectively. I think the one thing that I will add at this point, I always have to go back to the 30-year veteran, right? In April, it'll be 30 years that I've been a public school educator. And in that 30-year period, you see a lot and you have a variety of experiences. And I think one of the things that's really been exciting to me has been the opportunity, which I didn't realize it would be such a great opportunity, but the opportunity to work in a school district that I actually went to school in, that now I know was also very progressive. Work in a different school district that had challenges, but also when we didn't have some of the challenges that we had, now, was also very progressive. And then to look at the forward thinking that has happened in CPS. I say all of those things together because as we start thinking about programs, about opportunities, about an increase of early college, or how we're dealing with our ELL students, that doesn't necessarily mean taking away what's already occurring as much as it means increasing the menu of opportunities that are available to students. So when I walk in, I come from the standpoint of lived experiences, which I think is a plus. As a middle school principal, I had 42 different languages in my building. So I understand the concern of any time you make something separate, the concerns of what may happen around that, to Dr. Moffitt's point. But there are ways to to serve both populations, whether it's in a completely separate environment, whether it's a wing, just because of the services that are then available. So I just offer that as we think about, sometimes getting to growth means that we're thinking about doing some things differently than we've done some of those things before. And I just encourage all, and I'm going to continue to say that, to call on me, to use me as a resource, because for anything that we say that is good, there is an example out there for someone else that would say that it's bad. So it really depends on how we create the system within our own system to address the needs of the students and families that we serve. So it's hard for me, again, it's hard once you know something or you've lived it, it's hard to unlive it, right? So when you've seen things work and you have data that supports that it works, it's hard to say that it doesn't work or that, it may not be an option for us. I think the other thing is really making sure that we are poised to push our thinking around what can be and how we're responding to what can be. What we know is a huge challenge and that we're looking to address right now, but the marketing that we've done for our schools and what we offer in our schools has not collectively been one that might generate the interest for families that are not already there. So what do we think about in terms of a school environment, how we begin to have the individuals in the schools serve as marketing for the schools and not just the schools that everybody knows about or the schools that everybody wants to attend? That's a work in progress. And it's something that we have to really, really push to look at. This is what it is that we offer in CPS. So this is valuable conversation. But many of the things that you'll hear me, especially when our data is saying that something else might be needed, we might need to think about doing something else. It's difficult to then not really try to problem solve through that to see how we may be able to get to what success looks like. So I'll stop and I'll try not to say anything else today unless I'm asked to add additional comments.
Do we have anyone online that would like to say anything? Okay, great. I think that there's a way that we can kind of marry the two, like what the data is saying and what the culture of the community is wanting. I think that's super important. Yes, ma'am.
And you guys may all know this, but the city of Cincinnati is 60% rental and 40% homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that transitional.
Yeah, for sure. I think our city is changing, but we've got little pockets of lots of wealth and cultural relevancy that is just super significant that we need to maintain. And so Cincinnati has a culture, whether we like it or not. There's a definite Cincinnati culture that's kind of unspoken, but you know it if you've been here, that we don't want to touch that. So
and honestly, every city has one.
Sure. And we just sure. Well, we have to grow and we have to think out the box and be innovative. Did you have anything else to add?
No, and I think part of that culture is, I think what we're evolving here has to be natural to the culture that is. I mean, we can add to the school district, we can change this program or that program, but it like a plant, it's got to grow within the environment that's there. And I was just thinking of one thing going back, Jeremy's map on the three corridors. And I'm so glad to hear that of the music to my ears. One thing, though, talking in terms of racial culture and whatever, we can't use the idea of 71 or 75 to ever describe anything. Because in this town, 71 is seen as destroying African American neighborhoods, and in 75 it destroyed the West End. Or so. I mean, we should use them in our minds, but it's also sensitive as to what and how you present it. It's just no, you're good. And it's something we learned, well, knew or learned when we had to do the stadium and what have you for downtown. And I know for 71, it's very much at the core of a lot of people, what they think regarding Madisonville's history and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, because they both follow rivers, so to speak, or creeks, it's part of the culture too. But we just won't ever use it as an example.
So if we don't have any more discussion about the recommendations, was there another, I don't remember, was there another page, Rob? I think we probably, I thought there was another page to that presentation, but it doesn't matter. Jeremy, which one are you?
Consideration?
I thought there was a second page to
If
that.
there was, we probably need to.
It was the Excel that showed the schools that were, you mean the chart? The second
I don't know, I just thought I felt like there was another page to that. Like, is there one more?
After that. Oh,
Okay. Okay, so we have the work plan to discuss. That's the next thing. Ms. Phyllis, did we do copies of that? I don't think we
didn't do
did.
very much with it.
Yes, ma'am. We need, one of the things that President Lindy was concerned about is that we worked on our work plan. Yes, ma'am, we'll just do it up here with us. That's fine.
Oh, good, thanks. I think we could just say, first of all, that it's from January to December. I hate to tell you,
Yes,
but
January through December of 23. That's a standing committee. Ms. Bowman.
I
That's not
know,
ad hoc.
it is. But look at what we've just been doing.
Wait, I missed what you said. What did you say?
I think it's our work plan. I mean, we've got our directive, but our work plan basically so far has been several months. And then now it's January to December, unless we say we're going to get all this work or whatever. I mean, what's the end? I was saying that too. What's the end point? The end point's a big report or a recommendation to the full board, or phasing in various reports. What is it?
So I have that information, but I'm going to let Board Member Jones speak.
This is one of those areas when I saw it on the agenda, I said, folks are not going to like what I say. But anyway, this is very important work. And clearly we've made a lot of great strides.
Thank you.
And and we don't want those to fade out. I'm of the opinion that, and we said we were going to do this way back when, and I don't think we did it. We were and maybe we weren't ready to do it. But what we said we were going to do was develop based on what we knew and what we saw, and this would probably fit into that. We will make recommendations and then allow the administration to follow through with it. I don't necessarily, this is an ad hoc committee. It should be time limited. We should look at the big picture stuff or the big picture recommendations, and we should make those recommendations to administration, allow them an opportunity to work on it, and then perhaps come back. But I do think it's important as ad hoc to sunset. I don't think December. I'm thinking more of the end of the school year.
That would give us 4 more meetings to do this work.
Well, but
how does that?
But we don't know. We have to figure out what the work is. I mean, I think the bulk of the work has been done. That's my opinion.
So let me go back to the meeting that we had. Thank you, Ms. Phyllis, for this, because we actually have already discussed this rather extensively, and we came up with a tentative plan, which I will share verbally.
Oh, here it is, second page. Yeah. Okay.
It is, but we have the notes, and
I know what that
we
is.
said in December we would have the presentation of the profile of all schools. January we would do a profile audit of Central. February we would do a profile audit of West. March we would do a profile audit of East. And then in April, we would give recommendations and next steps to the superintendent. So that was what we said tentatively.
You have to take it to the board first.
Right. Well, we would all come up with the recommendations like together to take to the board. That was the process. It was in yes.
That makes sense to me.
That was what we've already
just.
We've already. I just don't want us to keep going back and forth. We've already discussed this several times.
I'm all in favor of that.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. But can I add one thing?
Nope.
After you get done.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Oh, can I go ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think it's so, as you can tell, we got the letter from PRM and we got Mr. Blocher coming in. Word is out. So what's going to happen is people are going to get wind, and we're going to have people coming to us to put something new on the table. And that's fine. But we can't establish a whole new initiative based on specific recommendations. So all of these things that people are talking about are going to have to be included somehow in considerations or whatever. But I just envision people coming to the public meetings or coming to here to say, I'm represent this school and this is what we want, and.
Well, I don't see that as a bad thing. I mean, maybe we're looking at it differently. I think that they should have, again, I don't know. I think every voice.
But it depends. We haven't, to me, I think, what are we, to me, I'm not clear when we talk about ad hoc attendance boundaries. What does that mean? And, we're talking about growth programs. We're talking about enrollment concerns. We're talking about capacity issues and all of that.
We already defined it. And so let me go back to how we defined it, because what we defined was that the committee's charge is to work. This is number 1 on that page that you have, second page. The committee's charge is to work with the administration and the community to reevaluate the district's boundary lines for elementary schools. 2, the committee's charge is to also assess the current state of the boundary lines and make recommendations to the board in alignment with the administration. 3, develop a framework for public engagement in board processes to improve transparency and discussion. And 4, develop and monitor an annual work plan for ensuring board processes, and then discuss. We've actually, I think that everything that we're doing is in alignment with that. We asked the superintendent and her team to conduct an audit of schools as part of this, but we didn't put that down as far as the.
I would add that to the work plan, because that's been a great.
It's definitely been adding the audit of schools.
Yes.
Volunteer. That was a sharing
adding the audit of
my
schools.
first meeting.
Adding the audit. That was part of our work.
She came in and told us that she could do this,
until we do
and
the
we delayed what we were doing, properly so.
Right. So that we could get the audit.
See the audit.
So that's what I was saying, is that wasn't part of our charge, but we incorporated that. Exactly. So I think that the work is clear. I think it's transformed a little bit in that it's pivoted from not just boundary lines, but incorporating the audit. And I think, and again, this is my opinion. I'm just one of 3, which is ultimately one of 7. But when you are talking about impacting the education of students on a district level, I think that requires a lot of transparency and a lot of engagement. And so if somebody comes from a school and says, hey, this is how we think what you're proposing is going to impact us at our school, and we've decided to come together and send one person, then by golly, you do that and you listen, because they're ultimately telling us what they want in their school. And I think that should be incorporated in and listened to by the superintendent, listened to by the board, and taken into consideration. And that's just me. If it takes an extra month, it takes an extra month.
I philosophically, I agree with everything you just said. What I personally am not clear about, this committee started out and I heard very clearly early on that we were not talking about high schools. That's what I heard. Now, maybe that transformed somehow, that change was, but we are, and clarify for me if that's what we're talking about. I'm not opposed to the timeline. I'm not opposed to the topics, but I do think we need clarity about just the work that we need to do, because it's hands-on work. And should we be doing the hands-on work as the committee, or should the administration be doing the hands-on work, like the community engagement and all of that?
What's hands-on to you? I just want to understand.
Well, it's how people define the difference. As an ad hoc committee, my own definition about what ad hoc does is you were developed to look to identify an area or focus. You come up with ideas and recommendations, then you turn those recommendations over to administration to do the work. What the committee has become, and if that's the way it is, then that's fine. But we cannot, as an ad hoc committee, we have to sunset at some point. So is this a working committee? Or are we doing it? And you all heard me say, you all have heard me say it's becoming more of a strategic initiative. And I don't think that that's the role of ad hoc committee. That's my opinion.
Okay.
I'd speak to that. First of all, we're not going to be able to do what we probably need to do just to meet our mission and direction and charge from the board for the board to be voting about this in some way, shape, or form in May. I would suggest it be June instead.
Okay.
And I don't understand the mutual exclusivity of work. Yeah, the committee's got work. The administration's been working hard on all of this. I mean, they've actually, in many ways, have been able to help us expand the horizon, but they're talking about the impact. Jeremy is showing us in reality what we're talking about number of kids and the whole geographic piece. So I think the charge actually says that the committee and the administration and the community will be doing this together. So I think everybody's working and everybody's producing good stuff. And I think the only thing we could add, and I take Carolyn's point because I believe I wrote the charge and specifically made it be about elementary schools. I didn't say just the magnets or just the neighborhood schools. It's basically that PK8 experience, and doing that has an impact on other things.
Yes, it does.
And that impact, very frankly, we've gotten more material and thoughts and ideas about the more from the administration. I mean, we've actually tried to stay away a little bit from talking about high school. I think Ozzy mentioned it the first meeting we had. So I'm liking this, and I think that this is credible. But I would extend it by 1 month. I would also say that we should also say one more part of this is to be able to initially explore the impact of the review, and I don't know what we're doing with boundaries, but I think that would be fair for us to be able to talk about that before we take it back to the board. And I like the administration and the community and in this form. The other thing I don't agree with what we wrote down, and I didn't then, was East, West, and Central, dividing the meetings that way, because I think we were anticipating there'll be schools from each of those areas coming into lobby. I'm not seeing that much, and I think the impact, and I think it's the administration that is helping us understand what the impact of what we're doing is, and I think that's a great role for the administration. So I would just extend it by 1 month, but I would like us to, on occasion, maybe 2 times before May or June or whenever it would be, to have some phased enlightenment for the whole board, so they don't feel like they're waiting until June to hear what we are coming up with.
Definitely.
And I think there's some things I'd like to see enacted before we do it. I'm still very committed about these neighborhood boundaries as it pertains to the North Central school.
One thing, just to clarify what you're saying, is to not have them, what we had suggested was January Central, February West, March East. What you're suggesting is to not do it that way.
We're going to do January and this and that, but you can see you can't really do I like adopting the quarters.
Okay.
Genuinely thrilled about that if we think that that's a good idea. But we're not going to just talk about West Side, because here we are today. We're talking East, West, and Central. And so that's the only thing. It would be
I
all.
agree with that.
Okay.
I agree.
Superintendent Wright.
I just had a couple of thank you, and it was great listening to the feedback. Initially, I think the ad hoc started right before I came or right as I was coming, because
We were getting ready for
just
you.
getting ready for me. So the first few meetings or first couple of meetings, I did not attend. The team attended, a liaison attended. I think the first meeting that I attended may have been October. And when I came into that meeting, and Phyllis can tell us for sure which one it was, when I came into that meeting and I began to hear the conversations, I knew that the conversations at that point, it may have been August, but I knew that the conversations at that point could be better informed by the program audit, because what I walked into were conversations around what was happening on East versus West, what we were talking about in terms of Central. I was a little confused at that time because I thought, and I see it in writing here, that the purpose of the ad hoc at that time was to get the information, provide it to administration with some background information around boundaries and for the elementary schools. I think where I love the amount of time, the time factor, whether it's May or June, I think either one of those makes sense to me. I think where it backs up the work just a little bit is I'm glad that we identified that in order for us to be able to come with a recommendation or come with these are ideas that we may have, we really have to be clear on that is what we are to do in this space. So if the ad hoc, and I think now beginning to learn a little bit about how I work, if the ad hoc committee or the board said to me, superintendent, we are looking for your best thinking from the team around where we might want to go next with these things. We want to consider our programming. We want to consider what we have on East and West. We want to consider Central. We want to make sure that we address CTE. We want to make certain that we have what we need in terms of arts. We want all of those things. Then what the team and I would do is go back, look at all of the data, i.e., and we want to address boundaries, and we really want to begin to have the conversation. And again, and I loved when you made that comment because it's so true. The challenge of doing business in the public is doing business in the public, because what happens is when you say something, people hear this much of it. They don't go back to Dr. Moffitt's points earlier and review the information that's there. And then we all start getting calls and emails because we said that we were getting ready to make this massive change. But the feedback that we're getting from the field, and when I'm talking the field, I'm talking principals, not just in this conversation that's happening ad hoc. I'm talking principals, I'm talking teachers, is one of the challenges that we have with our students, with their attendance, with their timeliness in getting to school, with their engagement in terms of what's happening at the school, and then the ability, then we can talk about transportation, is they are not in a concerted group where they have high schools that are within their neighborhoods or as close to their neighborhoods as you can get that then allow you to be supportive. So if you gave me all of that information and you said, go back and bring us a plan that we can then begin to talk about, I would bring you a plan that we would begin to talk about. And from that plan, based on the board's direction, we would then go and begin to socialize that with the community. Whatever schools were impacted, we would get their feedback. We would see whether or not that was something that was working for them. We would use all that data. We would come back and then give another, this is what we found. I think where I am right now is I don't know that that is what we're being asked for at this point. So we're kind of waiting because that's not what the charge has been of ad hoc. And what I don't want to do is get ahead of what ad hoc is. And so that's where I need just a little bit of clarification, because to Board Member Bolton's point, I think it's great for us to get the feedback on what we found in the program audit. At least I know that 3 of the 7 board members support these different things and the possibility of us moving forward. some of them, if we get support for the board, we could begin to move forward now so that we're planning for how that looks in terms of working with budget. But until we get the goal, and there are some other things here that could also be that possibility, but this is January. If we go through until June, we don't have the time to do the socialization with the schools. We don't have the time to include the community. We don't have the time to have the meetings for everyone in that community that may be impacted. We just don't have the time to do that. So that's kind of where I am, and that's what, if there's any additional clarity around that, or if that.
And I think, honestly, to be extremely honest, it's 5:31, and so I want to acknowledge that we are 1 minute over time, and we're going to be ending soon. We all, I believe, were kind of waiting on the audit. That was to drive the work. In my opinion, it was to drive the direction and the work moving forward. So we got the audit. I think that we can definitely work together to come up with some directives for staff around what the charge is, and actually with regard to what the charge is based on the audit information, also based on, we want community engagement from the internal. What I mean by internal is the students, the staff, all of that. But we also, but we want the community engagement, which is, I think, in this space as well. So I think that we have some work to do. But again, that was driven by the audit. And Board Member Bolton, when we discussed the agenda, it was, can we kind of debrief on what we heard from the audit? I apologize, Jeremy, we didn't get to you. We may bring you back based on what we come up with an agenda for the next.
I love that map.
For the next meeting. Yes, ma'am.
I think oftentimes, when I get wound up and I start talking, I think I kind of sense that people get irritated with me, but I am on board with this. I think folks need to know this. I am on board. I do get concerned about sort of the overwhelm, and I have heard this process just shift, and it starts here, and then it ends up here. We are not an ad hoc if that's the case. And all I'm saying is, I think you said it best, Dr. Moffitt, about just being clear about what our charge is, getting the big picture, talking through it, coming up with our recommendations, and then let the work start. And I'm good with the calendar. It's clearer to me now where our focus is. And the idea of extending it to June makes sense to me. And I really have to run. I got to take a phone call in a few minutes in my car.
Okay. So did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I can do this, the June thing. And I think that we should periodically suggest to the superintendent, we would like these things to be done as a committee. Now, the whole board has to decide, I'm sure, but so that we're not waiting until June to do something and we've lost another year.
Sure.
I'm not interested in losing another year. I've been sitting on some of this stuff for 6 years.
Yeah, and I think that when we give our monthly updates at the business meetings, we will inform the board on what we're doing and keep everybody abreast on the work. But then also, I guess there's a time to make formalized recommendations, and we'll figure that part out.
Well, I think maybe if President Lindy would add to the priorities of the board report, and I suggested this too, that part of the priorities at the meetings are to report back from ad hoc.
Yeah. Well, we have the normal committee report. You
But
mean additionally?
the minutes, forget it. I think it's a here's what we are talking about. Here's what we want to decide. Here's what we are thinking about. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that we've got some work to do. If anyone is in the community, either in person or online, and you have some thoughts, just send us an email. And we can incorporate those too. Did you look like you want to say something?
I'm just saying, leaving this meeting, it seems to me that there is a consensus about the 3 corridors. Is that true for this committee and whatever?
That would be East, West, and Central.
And if I could add, I think before we get to the point of right now, I don't know that we have enough for the community to start responding to yet, because we've not made any recommendations for changes. So what we will get, if we don't give them something to respond to, would be what everybody wants in their individual space. So I just want to go, I personally want to go on record and say that, because as we think about, I agree with you that there is consensus, and we actually, as we talk as a team, believe the same thing as we start thinking about programming, and we organize the programming audit that way. But the challenge is we will get individuals coming in to then begin to lobby, and when we start to do that, it's generally devoid of strategy. So before we can really get to the point of really thinking about, this is what this group wants, or this group wants this group to go over here, or this, we really, it could help us to provide this is what we're thinking about, in terms of we want to have 3 corridors. We really want to have more input around the thought of going back in some semblance to neighborhood high schools that with feeder school, something for them to respond to.
Well, I think, honestly, I agree with you to a point. I think the conversations that people are having, are going to have, they're already having. And so I don't think that it's siloed because we're having these conversations. They're already having. I think Kansas is a prime example where he said they've already drafted their stuff. They came to present it to us, but that was probably a months long process that they had already been in, and they just informed us of it. So I think that people have already gotten their opinions around wanting neighborhood schools and what they see as the problems and what they see as the solutions. We're providing kind of a formalized way for them to vent, but the discussions, I believe, are really pretty much germane already on what every school that is full needs space, and they've been saying that. They've been saying that for years, and they're going to keep saying it. Now we're giving them a venue to do that. But in the best interest of time, I want to be very respectful. Do we have anybody, Rob, want to say anything online? Okay, so we can kind of get offline and figure out how we're going to proceed. Did you want to have a last party comment?
I would just suggest that we use next month's meeting to come in and reach whatever we can have a consensus on the committee and with the administration and make that list. I don't know if it's a short list or a long list. I don't know what it includes or what it doesn't include. But I just think that would be good rather than some of this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where we are now. Let's show some action and definitive efforts. And I would like, if we can, with Jeremy's maps, again, more focus on our schools and what neighborhoods they're in. That would be great.
So we're going to come back. It's 5:38. We are going to come back in February the 23rd, I think that's what I said, February 23rd, with a little bit more focus on the audit information and how that impacts boundaries with regard to elementary attendance, which is our charge. And we could maybe we're going to figure out more specifics, transportation or whatever, but we're going to come back with the audit information, considerations from administration, our charge with regard to boundaries, and some discussion around east, west, central corridors. Sound good?
Yes.
All right. So
where we have consensus.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you back in February. Bye-bye.
Thanks for